For 25 years, racetrack gambling had been illegal in Washington, and professional horse racing was reduced to amateur races at county fairs. Breeders like Alan Drumheller were forced to race their horses in Canada. But the public's attitude about racetrack gambling would soon change. October 24th, 1929, Black Thursday. The stock market crashed. The nation's economy collapsed, and America plunged into the Great Depression. Few cities in the country were hit as hard as Seattle. At one point, 1 out of every 4 workers was unemployed.
And if I could only change my way of living, it would mean so much.
Suddenly, the sinfulness of horse racing and liquor became less important than the taxes they could generate. In 1932, voters elected Franklin Delano Roosevelt president by a landslide. Prohibition was repealed. "Happy days are here again" was the chorus heard throughout the country. In this changed atmosphere, Gottstein worked behind the scenes, aligning political forces to bring back professional horse racing.
Well, Joe Gottstein had some very influential political friends. Among them were a fellow who happened to be a friend of mine in later years was the late George Adams. He was an Indian, lived over at Shelton and represented that district for many years. He was very effective in the legislature. He was in the House of Representatives. And he was also close to the late Senator Warren Magnuson, who served in the legislature, was a district attorney, and ultimately became a U.S. senator, and a number of other people that were very influential in the legislature. The existing legislators and executives were wiped out. The Democrats took over completely, and President Roosevelt had a cradle-to-grave security program in mind, and the state of Washington grabbed onto that too. The late Clarence D. Martin was governor at that time, and the bill was pushed through on the supposition that the state tax generated from it would finance old age pensions.
If passed, House Bill 59 would legalize parimutuel wagering, a system in which the bettors directly determine the odds of each race by their wagers. Bookmaking, which closed the meadows, remained illegal. On March 3, 1933, Governor Martin signed the bill into law. Gambling opponents were outraged and organized a petition to repeal the law. 30,000 signatures needed to be collected in 3 weeks to put a referendum on the November ballot. State legislator Joseph Dana Roberts, who authored the bill, was furious.
90% of our citizens are in favor of the return of the sport of kings. The other 10% have been running this country for the past 20 years, and everybody knows what the results have been.
The state's largest newspaper, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, felt otherwise and led the referendum charge.
Racetrack gambling has been outlawed in the state of Washington since 1909, and for good reason. If illicit enterprise is legalized, why not go all the way? Why not have state lotteries that would draw money to the state instead of lining the pockets of gamblers with Washington savings?
With the sides clearly drawn, the battle was on. Churches threw themselves into the fight and declared May 28th Referendum Sunday. Farmers pledged their support. So did the PTA. The momentum seemed unstoppable. But on the final day of the campaign, referendum supporters were shocked to discover they were 1,069 signatures shy. Racing fans were jubilant. Gottstein and his real estate partner Bill Idris organized the Washington Jockey Club and outmaneuvered several other groups to obtain the Seattle racing permit. 3 days later, they signed a 10-year lease on the old James Nelson farm.
It started out not as a dairy farm, of course. It started out as a hop field and later went into potatoes. And then as more clearing was done, because there was nothing but maple woods and cottonwood trees that all had to be grubbed out or dynamited out.
Gottstein recalled the images of Longchamp Racecourse in France. And just as Longchamp is French for long fields, he would call his course Longacres. The track he envisioned required the skill of an artist, and again he called upon his friend of 20 years, Benjamin Pratica. In the years since the Colosseum was built, Pratica had designed movie palaces across the country and was regarded as the nation's most brilliant theater architect. Never once had he designed a racecourse. With half the summer already gone, Gottstein needed the track built in a hurry to capitalize on a full racing season. He asked Pratica to design and build Longacres in a month. It seemed an impossible task.
He took me out to the Nelson farm, 107 acres and no level piece of ground, I'll tell you. Of course I wanted more time. 2 or 3 rainy days and we'd lose a steam shovel. I didn't think there was any chance. All I had was a month to take that farmland and transform it into a mile racetrack.
While it was being designed, it was being built. Everything had to go together all at once. It was during the Depression, and the big Depression, so that it was thousands of people out of work, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people showed up at the track, men looking for jobs. So many that you didn't know who was working for us and who wasn't. For every guy that was working on the track, there was dozens of people waiting for him to get fired so they could try to get that job. And those people who worked, they took their work seriously. Those shovels, a man with a shovel was shoveling like a bulldozer all by himself. Things were moving.
The buildings and barns would require 2 million feet of lumber. 58,000 cubic yards of earth would have to be moved. 35 different crews would be needed to build the 500 horse stalls.
First time we saw Longacres, there was a pile of lumber and about a dozen teams of horses moving dirt and dust and stuff you couldn't see across the track. And we didn't see how they were going to run that year because this was the 1st of July.
Elsewhere in the Northwest, racing was off to a bad start. A small track in Silver Lake, 20 miles north of Seattle, had already failed after 3 weeks due to poor management. Determined not to make the same mistake, Gottstein assembled a team of the nation's most experienced turfmen, including Joe Hernandez, a nationally respected turf rider and race caller, and George Cruikshank, a highly regarded promoter, known locally as the mayor of 3rd Avenue. While construction continued, Gottstein traveled to California to invite owners to send their thoroughbreds to the Northwest. 6 of the nation's top stables made commitments to race at the new track. As opening day neared, workers continued to build at a feverish pace, adding finishing touches to the racing facility. 28 days after work began, the track was finished. It was hailed as an engineering marvel. Local papers claimed that no other structure of its size in the world had ever been built as fast. Longacres was the biggest gamble of Gottstein's career. Everything he had worked for was now staked on this 1-mile oval. "25 years after the meadows closed, 5 months after the gambling bill became law, 28 days after construction began, Longacres Racetrack opened. On August 3, 1933, on a sunny afternoon, 11,000 people filled the grandstand and clubhouse, paying $1.10 for admission. Cars overflowed from the parking lot and into the Nelson's cornfields. From the freshly painted red and silver grandstand, Governor Martin inaugurated the track's first season. The opening day card was stacked with 8 races, giving many of Seattle's sports fans their first taste of thoroughbred racing. The 6th race was the featured event of the day, the $1,000 inaugural handicap.
Seattle Post-Intelligencer, August 4th, 1933. The field was somewhat slow reaching the post for the inaugural handicap, but once there, starter Eddie Thomas did not wait long to find a suitable alignment. Out of the gate, Meadow Boy took the lead, closely followed by Coalizer, Onrush, and Shasta Broom. At the far turn, Flag Time drew out with enough daylight to spare. Sitting AC Ducey on his mount, Flag Time's jockey was confident it was all over. But Dimples Grayson, one of America's leading jockeys, was waiting aboard Onrush. Inside the straight, the New Orleans filly was turned loose, dashing by Flag Time 1 furlong out. At the wire, Onrush won by half a length, capturing the $1,000 purse.
Thoroughbred racing was alive again in the Northwest. To top the season, Gottstein organized a $5,000 match race between Onrush, considered the fastest horse on the West Coast, and Winuka, the Australian champion and heir to the legendary Farlap. In Australia, the race was a national event. Racing fans wired $2,000 to Seattle to bet on Winuka. The duel between the American and the Australian attracted 12,000 people to Longacres.
This Winuka was such a superior horse that he had the other horse beaten hands down. He won the race by about 15 lengths. The Australian jockey came up to ride the horse, and they brought a rider in from California, who at that time was a very outstanding young apprentice jockey. His name was Harold Grayson, had a nickname Dimples. And when he got done and got off that horse at the finish line, I happened to be down there, standing on the outside fence like all the kids in the neighborhood. And as he walked by me, he had big tears rolling down his eyes. He was actually ashamed of his horse and himself, and probably mostly to the fact that it didn't put on a good show for the local people. And that's what Joe wanted.
Excitement from the match race carried over to the last day of the season. Track officials stopped counting after 20,000 fans passed through the turnstiles, breaking all attendance records west of the Mississippi. Throughout the country, horse racing's popularity surged as people flocked to the racetrack to escape the gloom of the Depression.
It has been a success for us, for the state of Washington, and for the people who made it possible. Next year, we'll produce a finer, longer, better meeting, if that is possible. Joe Gottstein.